The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Welcome back to the Retro Rangers podcast. I'm your host, George Grimm, and I'm here this evening with my friend Steve Choppy, who interns with the Rangers for the 1982-83 season. Welcome back, Steve.
Thanks, George. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to some more fun with you.
This is like the third or fourth time you're here. It's almost like having a Las Vegas residency.
Yeah. I feel like a season ticket holder, George.
Yeah. Just slide right into your seat there. Don't worry about it. All right. So this evening we're going to talk about some of the characters and personalities that Steve encountered while he was with the Rangers in 82-83. Just let me recap that 82-83 season. Steve, that was 40 years ago, believe it or not. And I go back further than that, so I'm old. But anyway, the Rangers finished in fourth place that year in the Patrick Division with a perfect .500 record, 35-35-10. They swept Philly in the first round, 3-0, and then they lost to the Islanders in the second round, 4-2 for the third year in a row, and Mike Rogers was their leading scorer with 76 points. Mark Pavlich led in goals with 37, and good old Reijo Ruotsalainen, Plexi Rexy, had 53 assists to lead the team that year. The goalies were Eddie Mio mostly, and Glenn Hanlon, Steve Baker, and John Davidson played a couple games, but I think that might have been John Davidson's last active year, and Steve was recovering from his pulled groin the year before, so he didn't play much. Okay, Steve, why don't you tell us about Craig Patrick and Herb Brooks to start us off?
Certainly, gladly. I'd be happy to do so. Craig Patrick, well, Craig is, in my opinion, if there's anybody who would give you a feel when you're with them and vibe and what have you of your favorite uncle, that's the kind of feeling that Craig Patrick bestowed on me, at least. He had that thing going about him where he was a perfect gentleman, as he always was. I don't think anybody could say anything different about him in terms of that. Nice fellow, extremely friendly for a guy who had a ton of pressure on him working in the seat that he did at Madison Square Garden, and also with his family history, I'm sure he wanted to do that justice and honor as well. But given all that, and with all the stuff that was on him, he never was not friendly, smiley, always a kind word, always would have a word too, no matter how busy he was. If he ran into you in a hallway or whatever, he would give just some time for some small talk and things of that nature. So that's how I would say him. Very much a family man as well. Big on that. He was. I remember doing the club's holiday Christmas party. He was very much involved with family type of exposures and what have you. He was so much so, and he rather conservative in his general approach to things or lifestyle or whatever. And I think in my opinion, I kind of thought every once in a while he seemed a little bit out of place or out of his comfort zone. Because he was such a soft, nice guy and everything, I don't think he had the New York wherewithal to handle some of that little things that would creep in now and again. I don't think he was crazy about, although he never said it, and this is just my read and my assumption, but I don't think, the nights after games and such, we would to do what we had to do in the press lounge, wrap everything up for all the media people. We then work on the keg of Budweiser that was in the press room lounge, and have a couple of those, and run across the street, run across 31st Street to our favorite hangout, the Penn Bar right on 31st and 8th. Big place for us post game, and we'd go there and spend several late nights. And I just got the vibe that Craig wasn't totally tickled with people showing the effects the following day. But that might have been just the way I read the situation. But that's kind of what Craig was.
Probably one. It was over the summer in the fall. We had Craig Patrick on the podcast when he was talking about the 3 Ice League, and he said that he learned how to be a GM in New York, and then he took that knowledge to Pittsburgh, and he won 3 cups. So, so good for him. But he was thrown into the situation of a very high pressure situation here in New York, and he handled himself well. I mean, I always thought if he didn't have Espo in the booth, criticizing his every move, he would have been given more time, and something good would have happened. But the powers that be listened to Espo, and Craig was he was shown the door. He was not renewed. So.
Yeah, I think definitely so. Well, if he wasn't learning in New York, then I don't know where it could have came from. Because you're right, he was. He had his feet in the fire quickly, and kind of not under the gun, but as you said, or as you hinted towards, more so. He just thrown into a whirlwind a little bit, and it made him develop the toughness that he needed in certain instances. And if you're not going to learn how to be a sports GM in New York City, you're not going to learn to be a sports GM anywhere. And the fact that he brought that, as you said, to Pittsburgh and had a lot of success, good for him. I couldn't be more happier. I think he deserved it, and I wish him a lot of luck with the 3 Ice endeavor that he kicked off last year as well.
Yeah, with Craig, he was brought in originally to keep an eye on Fred Shero, because Shero was coming loose at the seams towards the end of his reign there, and Patrick was brought in like the director of hockey operations, and then when Shero was let go, then they put Patrick in charge of the whole organization, and Craig Patrick is actually the only Ranger GM who made the playoffs every year that he was the GM for the entire season. He's the only GM who can claim that distinction. So.
Now that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that. Well.
The only year he didn't make it was the year he came in for Fred Shero. But other than that, every year that he was in charge, he made the playoffs. So
I know he bounced back and forth a couple of times too. There in between, at one point, he was behind the bench where he didn't expect to be there.
Sure.
When you're the GM and you're having coach issues, you're probably going to be the the default guy to go to. Here, wear another hat for a while, coach the team as well.
Yeah.
But I think he was better in the office as he was in his brief stint when he was behind the bench. That's maybe a story for another time. But I think that his strength in the hockey administration was definitely where he wound up in a directing kind of a position. Not so much coaching, but in overseeing the whole operation. Very organized in that regard.
How about Herbie? What kind of relationship did you have with him?
I had a really interesting relationship with him. I had a very normal relationship with him. I thought that anytime I ran into him, now bear in mind, he's spending the majority of his time at up in Rye Playland, where the team was practicing and training back then up in Westchester County there at right by the amusement park. So he was often up there with them, with the exception of once in a blue moon, he'd pop in down in the round building and pop his head in to do whatever, meeting with whoever, or lunch with whoever. But primarily he was up in Rye for practices, and he'd be down at the Garden several hours before a game on a game date. And that's really when I, of course, got to know him. But I knew him well enough because he was there several hours before a game, several hours before he's really kicked in his coaching duties for the evening. And he'd have a little bit of time, and he'd stop in the office, and say hi to John, Janet, and all this. Of course, he got to meet me as I was kind of like the greeter, so to speak, in the office. But we got to know each other. We were definitely on a first name basis, and would trade a little bit of small talk. I sat next to him at the Ranger fan club dinner dance, which was a big thing for quite a while back then.
Oh yeah.
And this was somewhere out in Queens, I think we were. I can't remember exactly where, but lo and behold, I wound up at the administrative table, and just by chance, Herb was sitting next to me. We had a great time, trading off stories, little quick one-liners and jokes, and totally normal guy. Not the guy that you saw behind the camera or up on the podium for post-game press conferences, or certainly not the guy you saw behind the bench with the poker face and the whole bit.
Very
no,
serious.
he was different. He chuckled and laughed, and was just a normal old guy on the outside, and was happy to know him at that level. I can say I have to say that.
That's good. And who else from the player standpoint did you who impressed you?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I was mostly impressed with. I can't say mostly because a lot of them did appeal to me in different ways, but the people that were surprised to me, only because you go into a certain situation thinking you know the person, or from what you've seen or read or this or that, you have a preformed perception. Well, I didn't have anything negative at all about Dave Maloney at the time. I didn't have any. I knew I liked him as a player and liked watching him play, and liked his intensity and his desire to be a good teammate in the whole bit. But when I was there, just kind of like in post game, when we'd be in the dressing room ushering the media around and do all we need to do, Dave was one of the guys I would kind of cross paths with along the way, and every single time he'd engage me in some kind of a chat. It was very friendly and approachable. Right after a game, he'd be sitting there. We'd give them the X amount of time. I believe it was 15 minutes after the games were over, where the dressing room was sealed off from everybody, so the players who wanted to jump in the shower and get out of the building before the media came in, was able to do so. Who wanted to do whatever, just kind of a little bit of post-game talk from the coach. So they got like 15 minutes before the media was let in. But even then, during that crazy, because then when the media was allowed inside the dressing room, it was like a cattle call. It was crazy. They come flooding in there and what have you. But no matter how much they flooded in, and no matter how much they were approaching people, if Dave saw me and he had to complete a little story for me or whatever, he always did me the justice and the respect of finishing talking with me before he talked with anybody else. I was pretty impressed by that. Always a nice guy, always willing to help out here and there. So he impressed me the most. Believe it or not, Davidson did retire. John Davidson did retire early that season. I think he played a couple of games, and he retired as a player. And they put him in with. He was like I don't know if he was officially titled, but he was acting like as a goaltender advisor, goaltender coach, whatever. Every morning after a game, he would phone me in the office after a home game. Especially, he would phone me to get the stats from the night before, the plus, minus, the on-ice time, shots on goals, points, assists for each individual player. So we would always have time to chat a little bit, and got to know him much the same way from speaking almost every morning. And A nice fellow, very positive. If he was that approachable, and I'm sure he was, we saw how he conducted himself in all the years since then. If he was that approachable, I could see why he had success in administration. Because, nice guy, again, would never want to rush you off no matter how busy he was. And although he had just retired as a player, I did have quite a bit of, quite a few nice things to say about him.
Sure.
Interesting. I got to know about mid-season. Rangers called up Chris Kontos, who was brought in as a forward mid-season. He was a high draft choice of Craig Patrick's, and they brought him in right around Christmas time, or shortly after Christmas. And I bring him up in this instance because I got to know him probably the best. I was John Halligan had me assigned me to write an article about Chris Kontos for the program.
Okay.
It's interesting how that started, but I embraced it. Got to meet with the young man quite a few times, and we were. At least once a week we'd have a little chat up with each other, just because of the closeness we developed from there. As it turned out, he wound up with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I have a feeling that it was because of Craig's blessings. Craig was there, and Kontos wound up with Pittsburgh, and he finished his career ultimately with Los Angeles. I think he was on the ice when Gretzky scored his record goal. It was in L.A., and I believe Kontos, I don't think he got an assist, but I think he was on that forward line with Gretzky when that moment occurred. Kind of like a little bit of a thing that not many people would know, but I did because how I knew the guy.
You paid attention, yeah.
Yeah, very much. Now, Barry Beck, team captain, although a team captain and although very much a presence in the dressing room, if he didn't, I got the vibe that if he didn't know me for any reason or had any need to know me or anybody, because he probably had a lot of demands on him, he didn't seem to step out of that and do like a Dave Maloney and get to know you. So even though Bubba was in charge of the captaincy, so to speak, he was a little bit tough to get to. I think more than likely it was because of everything that was going on post game and the fact that everybody goes to the captain first. But that's people often ask me about that because he was the team captain. But that's the read I got off of him.
Well, the Rangers got Barry Beck when they traded to Colorado for him. My father called me up, and he just gets on the phone and he goes, Barry Beck. Like, now we're all set. We got Barry Beck. And, he did help. He was a good defenseman back on the line. He was big, he was tough. But he wasn't enough to put us over the hump. But I always remember that, Barry Beck.
Yep. I remember when Shiro was after him, or when Shiro was coveting him. Still remember there was I forget, I think it may have been a car manufacturer or a gasoline producer at the time was popular. There was some kind of an ad where they would say, such and such product is awesome. Well, I remember Fred Shiro always using that line in interviews. Barry Beck is awesome. He kept repeating it in several stories that I remember reading back at the time when they were courting him and trying to get him over. I think that would have worked out too if he didn't tear his shoulder up so many times and really suffer that injury. That knocked him down. That took away some of the steam. I understand he had quite a few problems with it over the years. But you play a physical game and you're a big man.
He didn't get along with Ted Sater, and Sater's the reason why Barry Beck left the Rangers and Mark Pavlich. I think Ray Rutsalainen. They didn't like Sater, and that was part of the problem back then.
I knew Beck had a bump. I didn't realize that Pav and Rexy had that as well. Speaking of Pavlich, there's a guy that appeared to me, as he appeared to everybody, to be quiet and to himself, and he wasn't like he was with select people. He was like that with everyone. A mouse would make more noise than he would in the dressing room, and it's a sad story with the history that unfolded there. But as far as you might see somebody in front of a camera being a certain way and in a certain way when the camera's off, that wasn't the case with Mark Pavlich. He was the same. I never had anything really to do with him. No business or PR-ish kind of things came up where I would need to cross paths with Pav. But certainly took note of him. It certainly was, took note of how quiet and almost shy he still was, to be.
One thing I remember about Pavlich was he was being interviewed on the in between periods on the Ranger games back then, and he was there, and he was chewing gum while he was being interviewed. It just struck me as I've never seen a player chew gum while he was being interviewed. But I guess that was him. He just needed. He just was a very relaxed person, and and Barry Beck really stepped up and helped him in his last years. He helped get him the kind of help that he needed at the time, and you got to hand it to Barry for stepping up and doing that for him. But Mark, unfortunately, it didn't work out well for Mark. So, but he was small and he went into the tough areas of the ice all the time. He was fearless, and he probably got a lot of headshots, and they didn't know a lot about it back then, and he suffered, So it's a shame.
I think because of his size too, a lot of those headshots were kind of masked a little bit.
Yeah.
We know how to watch a hockey game, and when you never really saw too much of anything out of the ordinary happening.
Yeah.
But I think because of his small stature, like I said, a lot of it was probably masked, and it's just I think I read, we can't remember exactly where, but someone had mentioned that with some knowledge on the subject, saying it's not the big crushing hits, it's the accumulation of the small ones over time.
Yeah, little elbows in the head, yeah, sure.
Yep. Absolutely.
Even though he had a helmet on, it so rattles you inside, so it's a shame.
Yeah, it really truly is, and tip my hat to Barry Beck, for, like you had mentioned, what he had done on behalf of Mark, and I don't know that anybody tried harder than Barry did, and how it appears he took it really badly when that ended, and I just feel bad for the guy.
Well, he also lost
everything
his son too. He also lost his son too last year, and that's he's really gone through a lot, and he's still hanging in there. So he lives in Hong Kong, which is kind of strange to think about, but he's probably one of the biggest people over there. But
that's what I would think, yeah, for sure.
But he enjoys it over there. He was teaching in a school, last I heard, because he's on the Facebook and he posts regularly, and he was writing a book for a while there, but then his son passed away, so I don't know if that's still going on or whether he put it aside. So
I would hope that he would. It'd be interesting to read. It'd be also kind of a way to tell us I would hope that he's doing well. Certainly deserves it. Yeah. That's for certain. But it's interesting on some of the, as I look through the list of players that played on the team back then, I had an interesting situation that occurred one time with. Actually, this is involving three of us: Robbie Fatorik, Coach Brooks, and me. And the coach's office at the Garden, at least back then, was the doorway to it was adjacent from the doorway of the players area. So
Right.
if both doors are open, the coach can kind of lean back at his desk chair and peer into on the other side of the almost the portal, so to speak, and into the dressing room.
Right.
And I had heard, and that it's just all I heard was that Robbie Ftorek wasn't crazy with, I guess, certain media people, or wasn't exactly media savvy, or whatever. Whether he was or whether he wasn't, I can't say. But that's something that did float by me at one point. And 10 minutes, I believe it was 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, right after warm-ups, the players go into the dressing room, they shut the door, and it's quiet time. It's time to put the finishing touches on whatever you got to do with your equipment, sit around, wait for the final blessing from the coach, and then take to the ice. Well, no one's allowed in the locker room during that time frame.
Right.
No one. Noone. No one. Well, there was a sign on the door of the dressing room, and I walked past this door a million times. There was a sign on the door stating that fact, no off limits, blah, blah, blah. So I'm in the office, or I shuffled between the office and going down to the rink, or up to the rink, and someone who wanted to speak with Nick Guerin, who was the Ranger trainer at the time.
Right.
And I said, sure, I'll get Nick for you. So I went, into the level where the dressing rooms are, and I opened up the door, and I could just come strutting in the door like nobody's business, like I'm on a mission here. And every player looked up and locked their eyes on me, because we're all sitting solemnly, uniformly in their dresses, locker stalls. The locker room is neat as anything. All the eyes locked on me, and there's not a soul around. And Robbie Ftorek ambles up to me, and he got rather close, and he said, can I help you? In kind of what I thought to be a somewhat challenging type of a sound.
Yeah, sure.
And I guess I can't blame the guy if he was masked. Who the hell is this guy walking when he doesn't belong here? So, I got to give him benefit of the doubt on that end. And I'm like, I'm just looking for Nick Guerin. And as soon as I said that, I heard Herb Brooks, his voice behind me. He's like, Steve. So I leaned back, took a step back, and looked out the door, again, across the way to where Herb's desk was, with his office door open. He's leaning back. He's looking at me. He said, Steve, turn around for a second. Just look at that sign on the door to the right, near the bottom. And I did. And I read it, and yada, 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 yada. I was like, oops. Tucked my tail between my legs. Said, sorry, Herb, and apologized to Ftorek, and walked right out of there. And as it turned out, no harm, no foul. But, yeah, it was kind of an interesting. Maybe Herb saved me a punch in the nose at the time. I don't know. But that's what happened. Yeah, by the way, we did get Nick Guerin to meet up with his friend who was looking for him in the first place. So there was a happy ending, given the risk that I was facing. But I have another one thing pops to mind. George McPhee. Now, it wasn't with the team except for the end of that season. Yeah. He had just been brought up for the playoffs. Right before we're ready to play Philadelphia, there was talk about McPhee for a while, and the Rangers might reach down to the Central Hockey League Tulsa Oilers. I don't think there's a Central Hockey League anymore. I don't even know if there's Tulsa Oilers anymore. But to that matter, he was being called up by the Rangers, and he was going to be, join the team for the playoffs. And he was due to arrive at Craig Patrick's office at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock I still remember, it was a Thursday morning. I only remember that because the night before was a Wednesday night, and as you know from back then, home games are usually Sunday night and Wednesday night in general. So we had done our post-game hangout till wee hours of the morning on Wednesday night, and I lived across the river in New Jersey, so I drove. On game night, I brought my car in. So I drove home afterwards, drove back in the next morning, and was pretty bleary-eyed. I was the first one in the office. I would usually be the first one to kind of throw the lights on, the old adage, throw the lights on, get the coffee on, get the wrapped up. That was kind of like me. And there's no one else is there. The GM's office isn't even open yet. His administrative assistants had not yet arrived. Craig's helpers, administrative assistants had not yet arrived. And the main waiting area, right outside the elevator on our level, there was the receptionist there called me because she greeted me on the way in, knew I was the first one there. She called me inside the office from at the outside desk. She goes, "Oh, Steve, is Rita or Marianne there?" Those are two of Craig Patrick's secretaries, administrative assistants. And I said, "No, they're not." She said, "Oh, well, we have George McPhee is out here. He's to meet with Craig Patrick this morning." And of course, he was early. I guess he had just got into town. He says, "All right, well, I'll come and I'll meet you. I'll come out and I'll bring him in." So again, my head is still half in last night at this point. Yeah. And I went out, kind of trying to rev myself up a little bit, get kicked in for the day, and just kind of step it up a little bit because now I'm dealing with someone. It's not just going to be me in a quiet office for about an hour. So I played host to George McPhee for about an hour in the office. He just showed up from Tulsa. I don't know how much he even knew about New York City, but he was, in a sense, reporting to Craig Patrick as he was reporting to the Rangers for his, whatever kind of, first time run through he had to do with the GM or not. I have no idea how that worked. But so he was there to meet him. There was no Craig there yet. There was nobody but me. So I kept because I was dying for a second and a third cup of coffee, and I kept trying to force George McPhee to want a cup of coffee because I wanted an excuse to step out of the office to go get one. And the guy wasn't drinking coffee. The one time I wanted a cup of coffee so desperately, and I was playing host to George McPhee. But, nice guy. I heard a lot about him. I heard he was a tough hockey player. Yeah. And, I certainly, he looked like a fire hydrant wearing his suit jacket. That's he was a solid guy.
Yeah, he was.
Kind of got to know each other a little bit as a result of that. Would again address each other, say hi during the playoffs, and he came on well that year in the playoffs. I think he scored 9 points or something for the club. But and of course, with a pretty accomplished GM he became as time went on as well after he quit playing.
Yeah. What about the media people, the reporters for the newspapers? Did you have any interactions with them? I think back then there might have been Walt McPeak from the Star-Ledger, maybe Mark Everson from the Post, Frank Brown from the Daily News. Do you have any memories of any of those guys?
Oh yes, in fact, it's funny that you said Walt McPeak first. Coming from New Jersey, that was the paper that we read first, was the Star-Ledger. That was, of course, Walt's paper. And he had a sense of humor. He had a very funny sense. Always liked to play games. Always used to like to call the office and ask for John Halligan in, fake voices, try to put on different accents and voices and make up a name just so he can play around with me as he'd call and ask for Halligan. I kind of caught on to him for a while. I kind of caught on to his little inflections. So halfway through the season, I knew when it was Walt calling just to play and have a little fun before he got on his daily morning call with John and to get whatever info he needed from Halligan. Yeah. But now, as a younger fan, years before Eddie thought of an internship, I was a kid, and I just started following the Rangers. And I remember reading McPeak all the time in the Ledger, and it always seemed to me that he's being a little snide, a little bit, because I didn't understand a lot of the media stuff back then, and and what had. But he seemed to be a little snarky towards the team sometimes, and I kind of, in defense of my hockey team at the time, I decided I didn't like Walt McPeak.
So,
and for years would talk to friends about, did you read McPeak? Blah blah blah. What's he? Who's he picking on now? Or having something to say about now. Now, granted, way more than 50% of the time he was right, whoever he was poking, But of course, when you're a diehard Kid fan, you don't look at things objectively. You look at things completely the way you want to see them, and nobody could talk bad about my Rangers back then when I was a little kid. So I decided to like Peak because of how he wrote. And who's the first, the second media person I met when I was there was Walt McPeak. And I never got a chance to tell Walt 15 years ago, I couldn't stand you, but I got to know him. He was very friendly and, nice guy. Knew his stuff too. And if
he was good.
Yeah, he knew exactly what he was talking about. That was his style. I mean, different reporters have their own style, and that's okay. They're allowed to have that. They get certain different stories that way, and things of that nature. But I had heard that he retired after he won a lottery. Now, I don't even know if that's true or not, but I had heard that Walt McPeak had a winning lottery ticket some years ago, and that helped.
I heard won a big jackpot in one of the casinos, and
was that okay?
But see, that was probably what I heard. I don't know, but he had that big Sunday column every Sunday in the Ledger, and any issue that was going on with the Rangers at the time, he would explain both sides of the issue very well. That's what I always liked about him. And he would come down on one side or the other, but he would explain both sides, and that's what I appreciated about him. So.
And I remember that column. I used to look forward to the Sunday morning column because that's when you got all the meat. You got a lot of stuff to read. You got, he would always have that big piece. I always looked forward to it, and always kind of let down when you find out Walt McPeak won't be no column today. He's on vacation or something, and it's a little bit disappointing. But he was good in that regard. The first media guy I ever met was Hugh Delano.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there in the office, and he had showed up. This was the morning of a game. He had to go to the press room for something, and Janet Halligan gave me the keys to the press room, which is again one story off from where the offices were, and I had only walked the hallways of the garden and the elevators, the service elevators, and etc. once with Janet, so I'm still not exactly positively sure where I'm going, but I'm escorting Hugh Delano to the press room. Not even sure if I'm taking him in the right direction, but I lucked out. Got him there. He got everything he had to get out of there and left. So he was. But I remember, because you always remember the first person in the industry that you meet. Well, it was Hugh Delano the afternoon that I had started. It was again Walt McPeak the next day, and I frequently remember dealing with Frank Brown. Frank was always on the phone with John, and I was impressed with his knowledge right away. Frank Brown knew what he was talking about, and was very much what's the word? Straight-laced. He almost was like a when he spoke, it was almost like he was a teacher giving a lecture. Very stoic, and it really stuck when he spoke. But he was a well-polished guy, and look, he's got to see he got parlayed that into a successful career with the media. I forget his exact title, but the media department or communications department with the NHL right now. Good for him.
He was the subject last week of an interview. I don't know if you know Paul Pascal from the Hockey Hall of Fame. He does a Zoom every week with people interviewing hockey people, and it's on YouTube. And last week they had Glenn Dreyfus interviewing Frank Brown. It was very interesting. I didn't know anything about Brown before he came to the Rangers, but he had worked for the Associated Press before that, and he did a few other things. And it was really interesting to listen to him. And he's very how can I put that? speaks very slowly. He takes a long time to tell a story, but he gets it going, and very interesting to listen to.
The pace. I do remember the pace of when he spoke was very much like that. And he was loaded with stories. I didn't realize that he came from that the AP or whatever, because he was a young man when I was with the Rangers. But good for him. By the way, he was a hell of a goalie too on an amateur level. He was a goalie on a. I only know him from like a little bit of like a beer league pickup type of a situation that I played once or twice, and he was there. But just for those who don't know, he was a hell of a goalie at one point. At least I thought so.
He actually wrote an essay for my book, The Guardians of the Goal, because he would go out on the rink after practice with some of the Rangers and put the pads on and play against some of the Rangers, and he would say, Thomas Stansom used to love the wing shots past his ears, and who had a hard shot and who had a turkey shot and who had a fast shot. And he went out there against the Rangers. He's an amateur newspaper reporter, and he's standing in goal against the Rangers. So you got to hand him that,
in a big way. In a big way. I don't want to be on the other side of the plexiglass when those shots are coming through, but imagine that. Well, he was good. He was good, that's for sure. He knew what he was doing between the pipes. He knew what he was doing on the keyboard and between the pipes, as they say.
Yeah. Got anybody else?
Let's see. There's I always was found that I always thought that Mike Rogers, he was kind of quiet on the team, but he had a quiet confidence about him. He wasn't flamboyant. He wasn't, he might have been up there on top of the scoring and came into New York as a highly touted offensive player.
Right.
But he never got a fat head over it, and I only bring up him because he was the club's leading scorer that year, and but he dripped a lot of confidence, and to try to get his attention, I didn't have to do it often, but to try to get his attention was a little bit of a challenge every once in a while. And again, I think it's just because he was so kind of focused or extra focused. It seemed to me. Nick
I remember
Fatito,
he was very fast. He was very fast.
Oh my gosh, yeah, yes he was. He was the guy. It was him. I guess Pavlich had to be Robbie McClanahan.
Yeah,
those guys could move the puck and their feet.
Yeah.
That's for certain. But I remember Nick Fatito back then as well. He had, I think he had just retired the year before that. He was in the office a lot because he was always, being Nick Fatito, there was always a lot of demands on his time for appearances or speeches or things like that, and many of those things filtered through the PR department. So Nick was there quite a few times, hanging out, meeting with John and Janet. As nice a guy as you may have heard that he is, he certainly is. But I've got to say, he's got the largest hands of any human being I've met. When he shook Nick Fatito's hands, I think his hands went all the way up to my elbow. It was some gigantic paw, and I dread to think what that thing looked like when it was clenched into a fist.
and heading towards your face.
Yeah, exactly. No, thank you. But sweet guy, nice guy. Just loved the whole thing about being a New Yorker. That that was able to make it on the Rangers, and I don't think he ever was took that for granted. The fact that got him where it did. Yeah, it was hard work. He wasn't exactly the most skilled, but it was hard work, determination, and knowing your role on the team. He found it. He parlayed it with a number of teams as he was developing, and I'm sure the Rangers were glad to have him at several points there, especially when the team needed some added toughness. That wasn't always there for a number of years.
No.
He certainly provided that. But he was a nice fellow. He was a lot of fun. He was like I said, you talk to him, or if he called, he'd want to know about what you're doing. How was your night? How was the game before for you working? What's going on there? Okay, by the way, if Janet's available, I'll speak with her. That kind of a thing. So, good stuff. Real normal guy. Well, most hockey players. That's, I think, one of the accolades that people sing of hockey players compared to other major league pro sports people, and that's that they are extremely grounded, extremely down to earth, and I couldn't agree more.
Easy to talk to. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, Steve, we're gonna have to wrap this up. I'm sorry, but we're running out of time. I could talk to you for another hour or so. So we'll have to pick up your residency some other time. We'll continue this conversation or some other conversation some other time. Thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it very much. It was a wonderful podcast, as usual. And let's hope the Rangers can play well the rest of the season and into the playoffs and make something good happen.
Well, this is the time to put it in gear, and I think they're lining up the pieces. So hopefully, some of our acquisitions here will lead to some nice results in the postseason. And again, as always, thanks for having me. I always have a good time being on here with you, George, and tonight was no exception. So thank you once again.
All right, Steve. Good night. Thanks a lot.
Good night, now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices, and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.